Today we're going to be watching a video that purports to prove the existence of God using dice. Yes, dice, you heard me correctly. So let's watch this video and find out how they prove the existence of God using dice. Now, I for one know I'm ready to convert. How about you?
Some people say that human existence is a result of a roll of the cosmic dice.
Well, yes, that is correct, and I hate to interrupt this early, but this is a relatively short video, so I hope you'll give me some leeway here. It is the roll of the cosmic dice. I mean, 14 years ago, there was a really big explosion, a big boy that went boom, and all of a sudden, everything was scattered, and then stars formed and fused, different elements, and exploded in catastrophic, enormous explosions, and spread those elements to the cosmos. And then, about 10 billion years later, those elements in one corner of the universe coalesced into a protoplanetary disk that formed our solar system. Somewhere after that, maybe 1.5 billion years, life arose. And then, over more billions of years, evolved into complex life forms like us. That is all the result of a cosmic dice throw. And what's wrong with that?
Like the gambler who stakes his life savings on the next throw, we just got lucky in the lottery of life. Some people say there's no purpose in the universe.
Well, what's it mean to say that we got lucky? I mean, so I am a white person in America, and this guy sounds British. Also, that is a very unflattering pause. I'm sorry for that. I didn't mean to do that to you, my guy. I mean, he looks a lot better than that normally. I think you'll all agree. But yes, I am a white American. He is a white Briton, I guess. And so, yes, we did sort of like win the lottery in an overall existential sense. I mean, the amount of privilege and power that comes with that alone, those couple things, is enormous. Most of the rest of the world can't fathom the sorts of like luxuries that we possess just by birth, basically. So, yes, we won. But a lot of people also lost. All throughout human history, most people have been losers, and that includes our ancestors as well. So it's really hard to say, it's a cosmic game of dice that we all won. We didn't all win. In fact, for that matter, granted, we have more privilege as, like, white people from the West, but even then, this man, I don't think he's a member of the elite, nor am I. I come from a pretty working-class background, and so we are essentially the common people of the world. And we have always been kind of like stomped on by the mighty oppressors from above, the kings, the queens, the emperors, the tyrants, the rich. So really, in what sense was this lucky exactly? Just to exist at all was the lucky thing, I guess? I guess that's what he's saying. My apologies if I kind of went on a little politics thing there. I know some of you aren't that big on like politics.
No grand plan, no God behind it all. Our numbers just came up and here we are. But I don't believe them. And nor should you.
Well, why not? I mean, it's perfectly reasonable, isn't it? We have a good explanation for how these things happened, and they don't involve the hand of God coming down and reaching and rearranging these things into these things. It's not how this happened.
If I roll this dice, the chances of getting a 6 is 1 in 6. That's not too bad. But what are the chances of me rolling 6 twice in a row? Well, the odds get longer. It's 1 in 6 times by 1 in 6. That's 1 in 36. So I'd have to be pretty lucky to get 2 6s in a row.
Okay, I see where he's going with this. Big numbers. Big numbers. Yes, there are some big numbers involved in the fact that we exist at all, really. And that's not really a problem because the universe is a phenomenally large place. I've said this in the last video, so I guess it wouldn't hurt to say it in this one. There are 200 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Let's just guess it. I mean, it's got to be fairly close. There are maybe, let's say, 5 planets per star. 5 planets per star times the 200 billion, and you've got 1 trillion planets in the galaxy. Then there are something like anywhere from half a trillion to 2 trillion galaxies. I've heard estimates all along that range, so just pick a number there. We'll go with it. So you've got 1 trillion times 1 trillion, maybe, let's just say. That's a lot of planets. And that's just in the observable portion of the universe. The whole universe may be, something like 250 times as much as that. These are very large numbers. And when we look around the cosmos, what we see is the fact that these numbers are so large make a lot of things a lot more likely. For example, how many planets would you suggest would be in the habitable zones of their stars? Well, guess what? We have some numbers because we've discovered about 6,000 exoplanets. That's 6,000 planets outside of our solar system. Some of them roam free about the cosmos. Either they were formed that way or got ejected from their star systems. Others, of course, are in their star systems. And out of those 6,000, even including the wanderers, the rogue planets, we still find about 1% of planets are in the habitable zones of their stars. That's a pretty big number. That's about, given the earlier number of our galaxy alone, that's about 10 billion planets in the habitable zones of their stars. But wait, you might ask, what about other essential things like water and amino acids? We don't actually know water is essential necessarily, but it's a good start. Well, water is everywhere. I mean, think about how many bodies in this solar system alone have water. We see it pretty much everywhere we look. Amino acids as well. Everywhere we look, every rock we turn over, we find amino acids. So, yes, life may be just enormously rare in the cosmos. We are still the only ones we know of, but again, we've only discovered 6,000 planets. So, we may be really rare, it's true, but the universe is very big, and we are dealing with numbers unfathomably large to the human mind. So whatever number he's about to cite here, just remember, there are some really, really large numbers involved in us existing at all that actually back up my case instead of his.
Now, every time I add the chances of rolling another 6 in a row, the odds go up exponentially, and it gets even more unlikely. Now, what if I rolled this dice 70 times, and every single time I got a 6? Okay, that's pretty unlikely, but it's possible, right? Well, in fact, the chances of rolling a 6 70 times in a row are around 1 in 10 to the 55. That's a 1 with 55 zeros after it. Now just...
Wow, that's a lot of zeros. I wonder where he's going with this, said literally nobody watching this video.
to put that in perspective, how long would I have to stand here rolling this dice, allowing about 5 seconds per roll, before hitting that lucky streak and rolling 76s in a row?
I would like to see the average American's guess for this, because as Americans, we are bad at guessing these sorts of things. And I think it would just be some really good comedy. So let's assemble a panel of average Americans to figure this out. Let's get our top people who barely graduated high school, I am one of them, and just figure this out really quickly.
Well, I had a mathematician friend work it out for me. On average, you would have to continually roll this dice for 100 trillion, 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 trillion years before your numbers come up.
Wow, that's a lot of years. Do you know how many stars are in the universe? Something like 10,000 for every single grain of sand on the planet Earth.
That's a long time.
That's a lot of stars and a lot of grains of sand already.
If you applied that thinking to us, what are the odds of us being here?
Clearly pretty high.
Now, the odds of rolling 76s in a row, 1 in 10 to the 55, as it happens, those are the same odds of something called the expansion rate of the universe being just right for the existence of us here today. From the moment of the Big Bang, when our universe began to rapidly expand, the rate of that expansion was exquisitely finely balanced. Any faster, and the universe would have expanded too rapidly to allow the formation of chemicals, atoms, stars, and galaxies. Any slower, and the universe would have collapsed back in on itself.
He's doing a very interesting sleight of hand here, because what he's doing is, there is a model for the expansion of the universe that works to explain us. Now, we are not sure if these things are really variables that can be replaced. We're not sure. We only have the one universe to look at. We're not sure if the variables could be really changed to allow for a significantly different universe. And if they were, we wouldn't know about it because life would not exist. However, there are other models of the universe that would work. And in fact, I mean, there are other models of the universe that don't even include such things as the expansion of the universe. By the way, I have no idea what kind of a Christian this guy is, but, you know, there's one thing we can be certain about. He's some kind of Christian. And if he's a Catholic, he probably doesn't have a big problem with the Big Bang. But if he's not a Catholic, and people doing these kinds of videos very rarely are Catholics, he's got a big problem in the Big Bang. Because for cosmic to inflation to happen, the Big Bang had to have happened. You know what book doesn't describe the Big Bang or the order of events afterwards? That's right, the Bible. Now again, Catholics don't have so much of a problem with this because they twist themselves into pretzels trying to explain it all away as a non-problem. But Protestants, it can be a pretty big problem for Protestants or anybody who believes the Bible literally. And obviously, there are a whole lot of biblical literalists who are Catholic too. I don't know what this guy believes. I don't know much about him. I've seen him around. I've heard him talk some. It's not that interesting, frankly. But it's a big problem if you're citing the Big Bang as evidence that things could have just, like, not happened by chance. Because it seems like the Big Bang itself was a pretty, like, a chance sort of deal, doesn't it?
But as it happens, the universe expanded at just the right rate to allow for life to develop in the future. For us to be here. It hit 70 rolls of the number 6 in a row, first time.
Wow, that's fascinating. But again, if it hadn't done that, we wouldn't be here and wouldn't know about it. We don't know if this is like a multiverse situation where there's just an infinite sort of like space out there and big bangs are happening all the time and a vast majority of those universes are uninhabitable. Or alternatively, they could all be habitable. They could all arise with like the same initial conditions. It could be that this is the one set of conditions that's actually allowed. Maybe it can't happen any other way. Or again, maybe there's just a series of dead universes. We don't know. And when we're talking about things we don't know about, it's pretty pointless to just like whip out the math and say, well, since we don't know the full story, let's just throw some math in there and see what we can just, divine from that.
And the expansion rate of the universe is just one among 30 or so other incredibly sensitively finely tuned constants and fundamental forces in the universe that must be just the way they are for the universe to be able to produce us.
Okay, here's the thing about these fine-tuning. Actually, here's a couple things about the fine-tuning arguments. I think the first thing is, one, we don't actually know if that's the case. We don't know if changing the values very slightly or very significantly would actually have the effects that we currently think they would have. I mean, every time that we've looked up at the cosmos with some idea, the cosmos has always surprised us in some way or another. For example, there is a whole lot of what you might call missing mass in the universe, and there's a whole lot of big problems like, why isn't there an equal amount of antimatter in the cosmos? These are pretty big problems, or at least they sort of were until we figured out explanations for them. It could just be that these variables can be just massively at odds with the ones they are now, but some other force in the universe would act to, I guess, offset the difference. Much like with the problems surrounding the rate of cosmic inflation or the amount of mass in the universe or any number of things like that. That's one big problem with like these fine-tuning arguments. Another problem with it I've already mentioned, which is just that we don't really know if these are variables that can be changed. We know that the universe works a certain way, and that's about all we really know. Can these variables be changed? Yes, if they can, I guess, then it's a big problem, potentially. But also no, because like we don't know. It could be a very big problem. It seems on paper like it would be, but there are lots of things that were real problems until they weren't, right?
So let's imagine, if I went ahead and rolled this dice 70 times, and what do you know, every time it came up 6. No waiting for trillions upon trillions of years, first time. Beginner's luck? Hardly.
Well, also, another thing to consider is this. It could be that the Big Bang is like a cyclical thing. And so we just have different iterations of the universe, and each one has different, like, quote-unquote laws and different finely tuned sorts of things. And sometimes life doesn't form in the universe, and sometimes it does. I mean, there are so many big ifs that we have about these things. It's kind of like pointless to like put your own little philosophy in there until we have some answers to some pretty big questions, and we just don't have those answers yet. So these arguments are quite silly. To merge philosophy, or more accurately, theology, and science in this way, it's really silly because we're dealing with so many ifs.
You would assume that I must have rigged it. Maybe the dice are loaded. Maybe there are 6s on every side. It can't be chance. Now let me ask you, why would we assume that this...
I mean, technically, it can indeed be chance. Yeah, I mean, bizarre things happen all the time. It's more likely to have, like, loaded dice, but I mean, lots of things are chance that don't seem like they would be chance. There are countless, just an infinite number of coincidences happening every single day, probably all across the cosmos, that are just extraordinarily unlikely, and they're still happening all the time that we don't even know about, we'll never know about.
This universe with us in it, which is actually way more improbable than my 70 rolls, is just a result of chance. The fact that we're here shows that someone's loaded the dice. In fact, maybe there's no dice at all. What if the evidence points to this life-permitting universe actually being the product of an intelligent mind which intended for us to be here?
Well, then let's get beyond the hypotheticals and the math and the philosophy and the theology and give me some actual evidence. You can point to things, but I need to see evidence if you're actually going to be making your case.
Now, you could come up with some speculative other theory. Maybe there's an infinite number of universes, giving you an infinite number of chances to roll the dice.
Yes, that is a possibility that I already mentioned. And what's wrong with that? It's a possibility.
Maybe. But we don't have any scientific evidence for it. So if you're hanging your hat on that possibility, then you're every bit as much committed to a faith position as the person who says God was behind it.
Well, no, I'm not hanging my hat on that. I'm just saying that if your proposition is that the universe works in certain ways, therefore we can postulate some advanced form of intelligence behind it based on math that is totally out of context and ignores the reality of the situation, then I'm saying there are other possibilities that you also have to consider well beyond just the math of the known universe. And beyond that, I must also say that even if there is no multiverse, even if this is the only universe, even if the variables can be changed, all of that stuff, even if I concede every single possible point, aside from the existence of the universe as it is now, he still doesn't have a case. He still just has, look at these big numbers then. Aren't these numbers just huge? The possibilities are so small of anything happening that how can we even be here? If you want to talk about weird mathematical possibilities, let's talk about this one. There is an idea, and I point to this idea every now and then because it's a fun one, that suggests that mathematically speaking, it's a lot more likely none of this actually really even exists. That instead, a Boltzmann brain sprang out from the void and was fully formed, a fully formed consciousness, and all of this is happening within the mind of the Boltzmann brain. Mathematically, it checks out. Do we believe that? Well, of course not. Because, math can tell us a lot about how things work. But it really just it can't just disperse with the whole notion of everything in one fell swoop, just because it is what it is. You can certainly make amazing predictions from it. Math is probably the most solid tool humans have to figure out the universe and everything in it. But math can be misleading, just like anything else. So with the Boltzmann brain idea, as with God.
Believing in God isn't a delusion. It's a perfectly reasonable conclusion when we look at the fingerprints on our universe.
I think it is neither. I think it is neither a delusion nor a good conclusion. I think certainly people can be very delusional about the subject of God, but I don't think belief in God itself is a delusion because pretty much everybody believes a lot of things. And whether they're true or not, we don't tend to call them delusions unless they get really unhealthy. Now, depending on how you go about your belief in God, that can be delusional. But belief in God itself, I don't think, is delusional. Although, I think Freud did, didn't he? Didn't Freud call it like a mass psychosis? So maybe I'm wrong. Not the biggest fan of Freud, but maybe I'm wrong. Who knows?
And if it's true that we aren't just the fluke result of a cosmic roll of the dice, and that we're actually here because a grand designer intended us from the very beginning, well, that's worth staking something on.
I suppose that would be worth staking something on if you could prove that, if you had actual evidence for that. You're going to need more than numbers, you need evidence. And, of course, I didn't see any. I didn't see this God forming from the dice. What's that, Deus Ex Machina? What's that, God from the machine? Maybe it should be, no, that's not going to work as a pun. My apologies. I went on a nowhere path with that one. Regardless, regardless of my attempts at puns that were going to, exchange the wrong word there, he didn't make a case. He didn't make much of a case at all, and it was a silly attempt, like all of these attempts are. This one, though, was particularly silly. Like, it's just essentially, look at the big numbers, everybody. Aren't these numbers so big? Imagine numbers being this big. Can you imagine numbers being this? Look at the numbers. But there are a lot of big numbers out there. And, anyway, for what it's worth, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a good one.